It's such a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. I had expected to spend 15 minutes talking up a really long book talk on the music of what happens, but I feel I would be remiss not to start by talking about an experience I just had this weekend at NCTE. Since we're talking about acting up and speaking out in YA literature, I would be remiss not to start by talking about an experience in which I had to act up and speak out at a major YA literature conference. As some of you know, some of you may not know, I was one of the panelists who had a challenging experience Saturday. It was a panel that was supposed to be about disproportionately banned and challenged books. Most of the panelists came to talk about that topic, but one of the panelists did not. I'm not going to name this panelist. I don't actually care enough about her to elevate her by doing so. If you want or need to know, you can probably look it up later. It was section L06, and she wasn't me, she wasn't Michael Cart, she wasn't Sabina Khan, she wasn't Joan Catewell, and she wasn't Tilly Walden. She was allegedly there to talk about challenges to Latino texts for young adults, but when asked, she passed on that opportunity, claiming that Latinos were not disproportionately challenged at all, that in fact the major concerns she had were for the truly marginalized groups in this country: straight people, Catholics, and police. Her comments included the following: LGBTQ people make up only 3 to 4% of the population, so why do we need all these books for so few kids? Books like The Hate You Give paint cops in a bad light and are dangerous. She is a cop. Parents have a moral responsibility to protect kids from LGBTQ texts. And last but certainly not least, gays are mentally ill, and that the average gay man lives to about 39. By the way, that one last fact, I pushed back and said that sounded very wrong, and if not wrong, probably was taken from the middle of the AIDS epidemic. She assured me it was modern. Someone from the audience fact-checked her. It came from the Family Research Council, which is considered a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and it was from 1994, the height of the epidemic, and it had long since been debunked as a myth. She did all of this, she braided about the tragic, horrible deaths of so many young men with a confident smile on her face. So, homophobia is not new to me. I've been dealing with it all my life, but I didn't expect to encounter it here at NCTE at a panel discussion by a panelist, and my shield was down, and I got, as they say, triggered. I was the first to counter her, first nicely, trying to engage her in dialogue, and then, when it became clear she was not there for dialogue, not as nicely. I was angry. My hands were shaking. I was not alone in my anger. There were other panelists who were also angry. So was, it seemed, pretty much the entire audience who had come to hear about strategies to overcome the disproportionate challenges to these books, which is a real thing. I'll tell you, I've spent a lot of time the last couple of years looking for ways to connect with people who feel differently than me, because a part of me still believes that we are all the same, that we are all connected. I gotta tell you that Saturday I found my edge because I found a place that I cannot and will not equivocate. When it comes to young people who are marginalized, whether for reasons of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, ability, there is no conversation to be had about whether their lives have as much value as the lives of other kids. I want to engage in that conversation. I will not give credence to another side of that argument because there is no other side to that argument. I know firsthand what these books mean to LGBTQ kids. I have received so many messages emails, tweets, Facebook messages from young people who wanted me to know what my books did for them, that they ingested them, they clung to them, that these novels carried them in difficult times. I assume that all LGBTQ authors have these experiences. The fact is that books are powerfully different than movies or television shows. They feel more personal, and that connection is quite powerful. So yes, these books save lives. And those who wish to restrict access to these books, they put young lives at risk. This is a health and safety issue, okay? According to the CDC, LGBT youth are 5 times as likely to have attempted suicide compared to heterosexual youth. For trans youth, that number is far, far larger. More than half of transgender male teens who participated in a study by the American Society of Pediatricians reported attempting suicide, as did nearly 30% of transgender female teens. Among non-binary youth, the number was about 40%. When this idea was brought up, the panelist inferred it was because LGBTQ people are mentally ill. And she is wrong. The reason those numbers are so high is because of the bigotry of people like this panelist, people who tell LGBTQ youth that their lives are less important than the lives of straight kids. And I know this too well. My life almost ended at 27. And it was a lifetime of being called a fag. And hearing that I was dirty and sinful and wrong and perverted, that led me to that place. And when I woke up in the hospital after having my stomach pumped, I knew I could not spend the rest of my life running away from that pain, that I had to face it head on, which I try to do, but even at 48, I tell you, the urge to not feel is great, because that rib cage is just unbearable sometimes. So words like hers are powerful and destructive and hurtful. There were no high school kids in this panel, in this audience, but there were some young college-age people, and I saw the looks on their faces, the hurt and the dismay, and I wanted to hug each one of them and just say, no, this isn't about you. This is about this woman and her stuff. This isn't about your stuff. Another panelist, debut author Sabina Khan, is the parent of a bisexual child, and she spoke powerfully from that capacity. I thought about how I don't have kids, and then quickly I realized, of course I do. LGBTQ youth are my kids. I am a fierce Papa Bear. You don't come after my kids, and let's widen that. You do not come after marginalized kids. They too are my children. We're adults, and this panelist is free to believe whatever bullshit she wants to believe about me. But where I draw the line is when she advocates against my children. Okay, so, the music of what happens. Okay. Interestingly, this is not a book about homophobia. It's actually a love story between two boys who are openly gay, who are comfortably out, and that's a modern tale. Despite all the people like that panelist out there, it's not an incorrect tale. It's just a complicated time. It seems like we live in multiple worlds at the same time. But this is not a book that could have been written 10 years ago, because it wouldn't have made sense to have kids not dealing with coming out. But thank God, now we can have some of those books that are just about the lives of LGBTQ kids. So real fast to tell you about the plot, two boys, Max and Jordan, fall in love while working one summer on a food truck in Mesa, Arizona. Max is half Mexican, half Irish. He has a His superpower, he believes he's a superhero, and his superpower is his smile, because he believes he's been told as a kid that he must smile through pain. That even despite recent trauma that Rob brought up, that he can't go there because he's not supposed to feel anything other than anger. Jordan is a different sort of kid. He's more delicate. He believes that he is, what would I say? His core belief is he screws everything up, and that he's not strong enough or man enough, and that mixes in an interesting way with his sexual orientation. This book is really about the music of what happens when our desire for the things that we need the most, love in this case, butts up against the agreements we've made about who we're supposed to be. What this book is really about is the messages that we give boys about who they have to be, how they have to be, and in particular, how those messages fall on gay and bisexual boys. Real quickly, I got some of those messages as a kid, for sure. I had a stepfather who I considered the ideal man. He was like the Marlboro man. And I remember when I was about 11, he used to, this is in the book, he used to swing me around the room by my feet. It was so much fun. And one day my head whacked against an armoire. It really hurt, and I started crying. And he told me, when I looked up at him looking for support, that pain doesn't mean very much to him, and that it was time to suck it up. So I got that message, and I got other messages. As a gay boy, some of the messages I got were that it was, this is not one, it was okay if I was gay so long as I was masculine. Think about that one for a second. Corollary to that, real men don't take things into their bodies, and I know that means something physical, but it also means something emotional, and that's the important one. Because this is about vulnerability. This book is about the search for wholeness in a world where we've internalized messages that keep us from being whole. Because I wasn't whole due to these messages. I could not allow myself to be open because I was taught to fear my own feelings, to fear anything that my stepfather deemed as unmasculine. So basically, this is the basis for everything we know that we have come to understand as toxic masculinity. It's the basis for every school shooting that happens. It is the basis for basically most of society's ills. I happened to write this book in 2017, right after we elected the worst possible role model for boys we could have in the White House. We elevated to the highest office in this country a man who is utterly unwilling to look at himself and see his own shadows, a man who is entirely unaccountable, unwilling to take responsibility, unwilling to be authentic, who dives into anger as it is the only emotion he allows himself because he's a real man. He denies the existence of all other emotions. But I'll tell you that a new sort of masculinity is emerging. It is one that is balanced. It is based on being accountable, emotionally intelligent, connected to others, and authentic. One that understands that there is power to vulnerability, and that there are things to learn about how and when to put up that shield and brandish our sword, and when to take it down. In fact, the definitions I just gave you are also the definitions to me of true femininity. These are basically similar movements. The men's movement and the women's movement, as I see them, are allied. The vision is the creation of a world in which men and women and all people honor each other and work in harmony. And I got to tell you, I really hope that this book, The Music of What Happens, can be a small part of this metamorphosis.